Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Rebecca Peo, and I'm the Director of Mentoring and Community Engagement with the Colorado Attorney Mentoring Program, CAMP. Our panel discussion today will be two practices, law and spirituality. Our panel discussion today is eligible for one CLE general credit. I will put the course ID in the chat at the end of the program. Just a few housekeeping items. We will be in webinar mode, so we cannot see or hear you. So if you have any technical issues, we won't be able to help. You can ask questions through the chat the uh, and the Q&A, and a recording will be available for replay on our social media channels later this afternoon. Our panel today is Rayhan Hassan, from the founder of Hassan LLC, David Sesserman, the founding member of Sesserman Law, and Y.E. Scott, the Senior Assistant Attorney General of Colorado. She's now retired. And I will turn it over to them to introduce themselves. Rayhan, how about you start?
Sure. I was going to nominate David. That's okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Rayhan Hassan. I'm a longtime practitioner. I consider myself a longtime practitioner of 25 years as of last August. As mentioned, I've had my own solo practice for the past 15 years. I recently joined forces with an international law firm called Omnis Law, which actually the reasoning of which flows into the discussion today. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm on the corporate transactional side, having been a recovered litigator earlier in my career as a young lad. And I'll talk a little bit about that later in the program as well. But thank you all for being here.
Why?
Oh, thanks a lot, David.
My pleasure.
I'm Y.E. and I have practiced law for about 41 years, starting in Nebraska for 5 years for various agencies, but most of my life has been spent at an attorney general's office, at least legal work. I did serve on the Colorado Board of Parole for 93 to 2000. Both as a board member and as their administrative law judge hearing officer.
Very good. I'm David Sesserman. I have been a civil trial attorney for 40 years. So Rayhan, that makes you the baby of this group.
I'll take it.
I am currently a sole practitioner. I have worked with several small firms over the years, as well as one large firm for the first 20 years of my career.
Thank you. All right, well, let's just dive in. And again, I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A, so as questions come up, we'll ask the panelists. So just the basic question, what is your faith tradition and how does it inspire you? And what spiritual practices do you engage in personally in your faith community and or in the community at large? Anybody can
You
dive
can
in.
go first. David, you can go first.
Sure. Sure. I was raised in a Jewish household. I practice Judaism. I'm actually more involved in the secular Jewish community these days, as opposed to the religious community. By that I mean being a board member of organizations such as the Anti-Defamation League. Where does spirituality fit into the practice of law for me? Certainly, as a starting point, a lot of my morals, my beliefs, my grounding is found in my religion. Somebody else?
I'll jump in. I
Please.
was raised in a Muslim household in Las Vegas, and so the devil was around every corner. So it made for a lot of yelling growing up. A very traditional going to organized functions and going to the mosque every week. Currently, I consider myself much more on the side, the mystical side of the equation. If I want to see people's eyes roll at the back of their heads and their brains begin to dissolve, I'll tell them I'm a mystic. I'm a practicing mystic, but I don't think that's so far off of what I do. I'm a student of the spiritual faiths, spiritual traditions of all faiths, and very deeply read and ponder and meditate on the commonality of all the historical traditions and new traditions, and how science is catching up to a lot of the ancient wisdoms. But all of that aside, as far as spiritual practices go, I think it's about, a day-to-day, moment-to-moment practice. And I'm a meditator every day for an hour. It's just what helps me tick. And I've been a yogi for a long time. And that's just a combination of, being able to have that physical movement and moving meditation along with the mental side. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go.
And I guess mine is the same and yet different. My mother was always saying, reminding people that I was baptized Catholic when I was 2 years old. And the priest asked her, "What took you so long?" So that was many years ago. And I am still a practicing Catholic, more or less what they want to call a cafeteria Catholic, because there are some things in the Catholic Church that I do not agree with. But I find that it is the best way for me to live my life. And I wake up every morning starting off thanking the Lord for opening my eyes and meditating, very much like you, Rahan, for quite some time every day. I am retired, but I still practice well when I feel like it. And so my faith guides me as to which cases I will accept or not do. And the ethics is really important to me.
Great. David, you touched on that as far as your practice and your beliefs and how they inform how you practice.
Yes. Yeah, I think that religion for many of us is a grounding, a background that really does set our general ethics as a person, as a human being, as well as our moral character. Further than that, it also, in terms of well-being, religion, yoga, meditation, physically working out, all of those things, I think, mixed together in combination or separate and apart, help all of us take care of ourselves and keep us focused. Law is a high-stress profession. If you can't handle high stress, you probably don't want to go into law. You certainly don't want to go into trial law. But all law is stressful. It's just that kind of an environment. Clients expect a lot out of us, and they have a right to do so, quite frankly. But we are a self-sacrificing profession that again has to learn how to deal with stress, or we fall apart. That's why organizations like CAMP are so great, because it really is a focus on overall well-being.
Can I jump in there, Rebecca?
Sure.
Yeah, please,
Just to
Rayhan.
add to that, David, and I think that's well said. We all view each other as lawyers, and in the practice of law, we take each other as colleagues, sometimes on the same side of the table or on the opposite side of the table. I think what a lot of us don't think about is it's not just the sum of where did I go to law school, how long have I been practicing, what areas of practice do I have an expertise in. We're also bringing who we are as a person. And I think a big part of that for most people is that spiritual, ethical, religious foundations that make us all the people that we are. And I view the stress of the law, and David, that was, I'm glad you highlighted that kind of out of the gates. I mean, we're a stress-filled profession. We're dealing with really high stakes issues, not just from a dollar amount, but from a meaningful chapter, sometimes, perceivably negative chapter in someone's life, and we're there to help and assist them. And that stress can be contagious. And what tools do we have in our toolbox to be able to manage that, so that we can not just be effective as attorneys and as counsel, but also so we can continue to function as human beings, and be able to nurture that human expression in addition to that professional expression. And I mean, it's always struck me that unless something has changed drastically, I think we still hold the dubious title of the highest drug and alcohol addiction rate of any profession. And for a very long time, that was held by the dentists for some reason. I never really figured that out, but unfortunately, we took that title from them, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago. And it's for all the reasons we all know about. And, the practice of law and the environments within we practice should not, be something that is all consuming, and is something, unfortunately, that can very much destroy people lives because of that high stress component. And so I often think about, what tools am I bringing to the table, not just to bear for my clients, but also myself, so that I can not just create an enriching experience for myself, do a great job, but also, continue to practice law. I mean, we have such high burnout cycles, and all of these things that we all know about. And I think it comes down to pieces that perhaps culturally, not just as a profession, but culturally, we perhaps don't prioritize as much as we should, like self-care and taking care of our own emotional, mental well-being, in addition to that of the clients. David, you made a really interesting comment. We're very self-serving in that way, self-serving not for ourselves, but for our clients. I mean, I don't know a lawyer out there who doesn't give it their all when a client needs it. And it's kind of part of the persona of the folks who end up choosing the profession that we do. And I think with that, if we're not really thoughtful about the effects of that on our own personal well-being, it's the old adage, you can't help anyone else if you're not taking care of yourself. And I certainly think really important tools to that are everything we're talking about today, the religion, spirituality, ethics, and all of that. And I think we don't talk about that enough. So I really appreciate Camp putting on this program. It is an essential part of who we all are, I mean, regardless of what we call it or consider it or prioritize it, but it's all in there.
I think my fellow panelists have hit on a issue that is really important, especially for female attorneys, especially those that have children. My marriage fell apart just as I finished graduating from law school. And so I had 3 kids to raise by myself as I grew my practice. And it was very stressful. And that stress got to the point where my kids told me they don't even want to talk to me when I'm in trial mode. And I told them, give me what you need today. Don't ask me about next week, because right now I got to stay focused on what I'm doing. That's not good. That kind of stress means you lose sleep, you don't take care of your health. And like you said, it's not just also taking care of you, taking care of your client, and being nice to your adversary. Although they are an adversary, they are not adversarial. And the stress of not being able to pick your own clients and the jobs that I had and the work that you have to do, you have to stop and think, do I really want to do this kind of work? And the nice thing about it, when I first started practicing in Colorado, was right after Amendment 2 was passed. And we had to defend that. The Attorney General was very conscious, and she said, I want attorneys who want to do this particular appeal. If you don't feel comfortable with it, don't sign up for it. And that was a really wonderful job. So I use that all the time now, with what kind of cases I'm still going to work on. I had a case where the attorney on the other side was unethical, And I tried to figure out, okay, how can I still represent my client vigorously as we are supposed to do and deal with this other attorney? Because working in my field, which is, like I said, most of the time the Attorney General's office, I couldn't just report him to the Supreme Court. They told me, which is what I was going to do. But they said, no, the Attorney General, since you work for the Attorney General has to approve it. And so, you know, you have to take, okay, how do I personally feel about this case? Am I going to do this case and have somebody else do it? Fortunate for me, the Attorney General agreed and we had the person disbarred. But, you know, you have to be strong enough to stand on your own principles.
I got a question for my fellow panelists, since this is sort of the intersection of religion and the practice of law. You know, with all of this stress and why, you know, when it comes to how you treat co-counsel, opposing counsel, the court, other judicial officers, where does religion for you fit in there? You know, I guess for me, and I'll answer my own question a little bit, religion helps me form, you know, how I treat others, how I treat myself, but also how I treat others. And so it really is for me okay, I think you're acting improperly. I don't think you really meant to do that. That's not who you are. And it's wanting to give somebody a second chance. Third chance, it's a different story.
Well, I'll answer that question. For me, my religion tells me how I'm supposed to treat people, regardless of how they treat me. And so that is the guiding principle for me, whether I'm practicing law or anything else. In my life and in my legal profession, I do what I think is right, no matter what anybody else is doing. Even when you have a judge that seems to be presidential against you or your office, okay, you still have to respect that judge for where they are, or other court personnel and other attorneys, and still do what your client wants you to do. If you have a client that doesn't want to do what you're advising them to do, the question is, do you want to be the advisor to that client? And that's a choice I had to make in one case, even if it meant losing my job. And I was told, well, you know, we represent this client, and we give them legal advice, but we can't make them take that advice.
We got a comment in the chats. Thank you, Wai, for taking the theory of religion into practical application. And Wai, if you could speak up just a little bit, you're kind of dropping off a little bit in your mic.
I will do that. Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
You know what word comes to my mind immediately on this topic is patience, 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 and trying not to be reactive. You know, sometimes opposing counsel will try and goad you into saying certain things or acting in a certain way. And so for me, it's that inner struggle. Do I practice patience, which I think is a part of every spiritual and religious teaching, set of teachings, and how will my reactions, you know, kind of focus upon and speak to me as a practitioner as well as my client who I'm representing. And you know, it's a hard one because it always feels like we continue to dissolve into uncivilized behavior. As soon as we feel like there's a bottom, there seems to be a deeper bottom. That's cynical, I admit, but it does feel that way. And I can't, you know, kind of control the actions of anyone else. The only thing I can control are my reactions. And so I find it to be, it can be a very testing practice of patience, and I think that's where, you know, ethics, spirituality, religious teachings come in. How do you really flex that muscle when you need to, rather than just losing your cool and you know, not acting in the ways that you would be proud of. Let's just say that.
So, did your spirituality affect your decision to become a lawyer? Or did it develop as your career went on?
That's easy for me. The answer is no. My spirituality wanted me to be a nun. My husband told me to be a lawyer.
Very good. Go ahead.
I'd say it did not, in, you know, in the most obvious ways. Because I'm South Asian, I was expected to be a doctor, and so I mentioned law school, and you know, everyone had a fit. So there was all sorts of other things going on. But I think the draw to the law was this notion of justice, equity, all of those pieces, which I think are informed by our sense of ethics in religious practice and spiritual practices. So I suppose the answer is yes.
My answer is much like YE. It's a definite no. My religious background, upbringing really had nothing to do with my decision to become a lawyer. My decision to become a lawyer was I was in sales after college for a while and had all sorts of ideas and was told, well, your job is to sell, not to market. That's marketing. And I said, you know, I really want a career where I'm challenged mentally. And so I turned to the practice of law.
All right. Following up on what we've talked earlier about ethics, does your spirituality inform your sense of justice or ethics in your profession?
See how I could not. I mean, when you're practicing, no matter what side you're on, you have to think of the other person. And that is what at least for me, what my religion teaches is always look at things from their viewpoint and figure out how you fit into their lives and still be the individual that your spirituality makes you be. So I don't see how you could separate the two.
I agree. I mean, to me, the answer is absolutely. Although that being said, I think religion gives you a sense of fairness and wanting a fair result for your client or you. The law isn't always fair. You know, what is fair may be a losing battle in a courtroom. I was first 20 or so years of my practice engaged in a lot of ERISA litigation. ERISA is a law that is known as being not fair. You know, it is what it is. And there are procedures that need to be followed and must be followed. And if they're not, it doesn't matter if it's not fair. And so that's why sometimes there's a conflict. And you have to, you know, many times, at least I find as a lawyer, you just have to, you know, wrestle with that internally or externally with, you know, this may not be a fair result, but it's the right result or it's just. There are equitable claims, you know, absolutely for sure. But not every case is a case in equity and what is fair.
I'd agree with that. I think we could have a whole discussion just on that notion, David, of what's fair. It's like beauty, it's in the eyes of the beholder. And I think my upbringing allowed me to look at certain situations in a certain way within that lens of, is that fair? Is that right? I think the older I get, the more experienced I get, the more, you know, there's a Sufi tradition, which is Islamic mysticism, that speaks to there's no good or bad. It just is, because we can put all sorts of subjective contexts on top of any kind of situation. Something could feel horrible, but maybe that was that changing point for that individual to make them make certain decisions that led to great results. And it's something I struggle with quite often. What I feel to be fair and right may not be under the law. So that's one piece. And it may just not be, it may just not feel good at all. And how do you kind of not find resolution to that, but how do you kick that around in a way where you're not just getting negative and cynical? Because I think there's a lot of learning points around that. I'd like to think the older I get, the more I can kind of look at things from different perspectives, and that level of empathy continues to increase, where you're looking at the equation from maybe opposing party, or maybe just from somebody else's, the old saying, walk in someone else's shoes, which is the kind of benchmark of empathy and design thinking. And I find I get a much greater understanding of maybe there's something beyond my concepts and perceptions of what's right and what's fair. And I find the more I'm open to that notion, I may not agree with it, more I'm open to that, that's where I sit at this very moment, which could change at any moment, any minute. But David, that's a great comment. It's something I certainly struggle with. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
So we'll switch gears and talk about your spirituality intersecting with your practice. We've been talking about that as things go, but these questions are more pointed as, has your spirituality influenced how you view the practice of law and in your own experience as an attorney? Anyone?
I can jump in.
Sure.
I'll say with the practice of law, it's really, what values can I articulate, and what do I hold as priorities for myself as a practitioner and as a human being? And for a long time, 15 years, been working just solely with my solo practice, where I get to dictate what my values are for my organization to an extent. As I mentioned at the top of the program, I joined forces with a firm called Omnis Law, and I was attracted to them because of a values proposition. It wasn't obviously there were a lot of other things, but top priority for me was an articulation of values of the firm that not just lined up with my priorities, but also I found, wow, I feel like I'm the only one at the table in conversations that I'm having that's talking like this. And it was about practicing with kindness and creating an enriching experience for the lawyers who work there. And that just resonated with me as such a strong value. And that was absolutely one of the top reasons why I decided to kind of make this, change from a career perspective, or I should say from a practice perspective. And for me, that's ethics, that's beliefs, spirituality, religion, values, all of that tied together, directly influencing, a pretty significant decision for myself.
I like what you said about using your own values. My problem that I had is I don't want to say, I'm opposed to some of the teachings of the Catholic Church, particularly in regards to abortion and the death penalty. I'm also opposed to some of the things that are legal that I personally and religiously don't believe in. So the question is how do you practice in an area that, although, let's take abortion. If you don't believe that abortions should be done, how do you go ahead and fight for the law of abortion that allows for abortion, especially when your state says they have this law that says yes, you can have an abortion. How do you handle that? You know,
You
it's
know,
those types of conflicts that make it really difficult to practice law and your faith. Like, I wouldn't take any death penalty case at all. I wouldn't work on it.
Rebecca, your question made me think, and you kind of saw me roll my eyes and think as you were asking it. The answer is fundamentally yes. My religion, my religious background and upbringing creates a lot of who I am and what is important to me. One of the great things I've found about being a lawyer is I have the ability to help others, and it's a certain skill set. Sometimes that is, and probably most of the time, it's fee for service, and it's how I make a living. However, um, my commitment to things like access to justice, um, yes, my religious upbringing teaches me that I should leave this world a better place than I found it. And so that is, that's a lot of who I am. I know when COVID first came about, and we're talking before there was ever a case in Colorado, I sort of jumped on this and thought, gosh, this could be something major. It turned out it was. And being one who was early to that party, so to speak, I found myself in a position to guide a number of others on how to handle some of the challenges, including, quite frankly, a number of religious institutions, some mine, some not mine. But because of my sense of who I am and I can help people, I refuse to make a dime on COVID. I just, it didn't work for me to make money on a pandemic. And so I simply, volunteered a lot of my time to guide and counsel others or institutions, through this challenging time. I look at, myself. For me, I'm fairly involved in the Bar Association, Colorado and America, and again, that's a commitment to be engaged in a community, the legal community, the worldwide community. It's probably part of why I mentor other attorneys, formally and informally, because that is, I think, my religious value system and background really is what has guided some of those decisions.
Awesome. We've got a couple questions in the chat.
Sure.
Thanks all for sharing. I've heard the panelists believe their religion helps guide their legal practice with patience, fairness, and empathy. What parts of the religious texts touch on these topics? Can atheists, agnostics, and polytheists also have patience, fairness, and empathy, or do you have to be religious?
Mystic, this one's for you.
I think absolutely it applies to anyone. I think so much of I don't want to get overly simplistic and minimize, but there's so much commonality amongst the religious faiths and traditions, and philosophies and cultures and the ways societies conduct themselves, that I think these are just kind of integral human behaviors, patience, empathy, all of those things. And, whether somebody is looking to comfort in a particular book or a particular place, or just a particular state of mind that they're able to put themselves in, I think we can leave those labels and organizations at the door, and those are, I think, terrific practices, not in the religious sense, but as behaviors. How about that? That anybody could absolutely explore and benefit from. I think there's been a lot in history as to how folks characterize the same thing. And if we can take a step away from that for our own personal benefit, I just think those qualities can be enjoyed by all, regardless of faith or lack thereof, or whatever worldview one has.
Part of
Yeah.
that question. Oh, go ahead.
I think atheists and agnostics have the same problems that we all have, and they have the same values that we all have. Even if they don't believe in a life after death or a superpower, they still have values as to how they treat other people and how they practice law. And so I think the only reason we have focused on how religion faces us, because that's the topic of this whole webinar, is law and spirituality, you know. But I think they have the same type of beliefs and values that we do.
Part of that question was asking about, specific texts, if you will, within the various faiths. And how does that impact us? For me, it doesn't. I am not an individual who goes around quoting the Bible, the Torah, the Quran. For some people, that's their home base, and more power to them. That doesn't happen to be me. But those teachings, the belief system, that to me is what guides me, what drives me.
We've got a couple of comments in the chat. This is great stuff. I find myself identifying well with all the panelists and chuckling along with some of the comments. I wrote my undergraduate thesis in mystical religious traditions. I'm a recovering Catholic, and my wife of 33 years is Jewish. And the next comment is not intending to throw a political grenade, but looking for collective wisdom in navigating the intersection of law and spirituality within your legal practice. How does your faith shape your assessment of the current administration's approach to judicial independence and the rule of law? Additionally, given the complexities and challenges of the present legal and political landscape, how does your spirituality help you find peace?
Boy, who wants to address that bombshell?
I'll punt on the first part, but how does it help me find peace? It gives me a long-term view of things.
I
Just
don't,
to
I don't,
yes.
I don't have peace with the current administration's actions. I don't know that we'll have peace at all in the next 4 years because it's so chaotic. But my faith helps me have hope that our democracy will survive.
Yeah, I'd agree with my fellow panelists. I think also it's how you approach it. You may not agree or disagree with what the administration's doing, but you do have a choice as to what and how you consume the information regarding all of that. And I know I used to be a very avid consumer of the news. I'd read everything I could. I'd watch the shows, the pundits of all, persuasions. And I'll tell you, my life got a lot better and my stress level went down substantially when I stopped. And that doesn't mean I'm uninformed. It just means I'm much more selective around the time I spend on it and how I do that. And so I think, you know, that's a little bit of empowerment, right? And I think spirituality and faith allows for that, that I don't have to be, overrun by everyone's stresses and problems. I can, carve out a niche as to what is a good distraction for me versus what do I feel like I really, really need to know. And again, it goes to that self-care element is the way I look at it. And I don't think I'm alone, around this notion of I'm going to pick and choose, how much of that I'm going to consume. And I'm going to stop when I feel like it becomes a negativity in my life. Now, that doesn't mean I'm putting my head, in the sand. But that also doesn't mean I have to let it consume my life.
And the other is sort of in this bombshell environment, if you will. Um, to me, if you're not happy with where things are right now, as lawyers, and I think our religious backgrounds would support us in getting engaged, but don't be passive. Engage, and there's something called the midterms. If you're not happy with the uh, Republican control throughout, start working towards the midterms. See what can change.
Agreed.
If you're happy, more power to you.
Well, keep working towards keeping the status quo if you're happy. I couldn't agree more. That's a great comment. Go do something about it. I mean, I think putting action into play is always a better mental state, emotional state to be in. And I think that's spirituality speaks to that quite specifically.
Rayhan, I think this question is directed at you.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. With respect to meditation, how do you get into the right mind state to meditate? I find it very hard to turn my brain off, and thoughts are constantly running through my head when I try to meditate. Any tips? Thank you.
Oh, it's such a great question, and it's so hard, especially in today's day and age with the access to information and social media and everything like that. For me, I do it first thing in the morning. It's the first thing I do. I do it before I check I'm not on a lot of social media, but what I am on is before I do that. It's before I check the news. It's before I check my email. And I find that to be the biggest indicator of success. If I can meditate even for 10 minutes before I check my email, one, it's not going to upset me so much. Two, I won't feel as stressed out. And three, I can deal with whatever is coming into my inbox a lot clearer and a lot better. So first and foremost, I'd encourage, and I know it's hard because everyone's lives are so busy, but if you could try and squeeze in even 10 minutes in the morning, before the household wakes up. I've found that to be a game changer for me. The other is I do a lot of guided meditations, which are really helpful to focus the mind, so that because it's the chattering monkey in your brain. You start thinking about what you need to do and all of those things, but having a guided meditation allows you to focus a lot easier. And it's a practice. I had a great yoga teacher that said, look, it's called yoga practice, not yoga perfect. And I kind of carry that into everything. That's why it's the practice of law. It's not perfect law. I'd say the same thing with meditation. Have a lot of grace for yourself. It's a skill. It's like working out. If you go to the gym, you're not going to be able to just pick up 100-pound dumbbell. No, you're going to work up to it, and you're going to start off with lighter weights, and with consistency and discipline, you're going to reach your goals. I'd say the same thing with meditation. Just be really, really kind to yourself. Practice that grace for yourself, and it's little things. If it's not 10 minutes, then try 5 minutes. But I find at the beginning of the days is much easier.
I have to agree with that. I do my meditation first thing in the morning. I keep the lights low, or sometimes don't even turn the light on if I'm just going to, as you say, once you get into meditation, you can meditate in the dark. But I find that guided, like you said, the guided meditation helps put you in a mindset where you have nothing else to think about except for your meditation.
As the panel member who does not actively meditate, it is very important that we as lawyers be able to turn off that chipmunk from chirping. Our minds are many of us constantly running. And so, how do we deal with that? I know I and others, I don't do it anymore, but I used to keep a pad of paper and a pen next to my bed. Why? Because in the middle of the night, I would wake up with brilliant, and I mean brilliant thoughts. And I couldn't go back to bed unless I wrote down those brilliant thoughts. Now, I should have been a doctor. You cannot read my handwriting. I have never, the next morning, ever been able to read what those brilliant thoughts were that I wrote the night before. But by writing down those brilliant thoughts, I was able to go back to bed and take care of myself. Now, I don't meditate every day, but I do take care of myself in my mind. I get up and I work out first thing every morning. I go downstairs. I have some, whether it's a bike, a treadmill, whatever it may be. I have equipment down there, and I go downstairs and I work out, and that gets my mind set. If I'm chirping, my mind is chirping at 3 a.m. You know what? Not at all unusual for me to go downstairs, work out for 45 minutes or an hour, and I can go back to bed. It shuts that chirping down. And so I think if it's meditation, if it's working out, if it's whatever, you have to learn how to take care of yourself and whatever works for you. And if it's guided meditation, if it's personal meditation, if you're highly religious, and if it's reading Bible verses to yourself, whatever allows you to turn it off, I think is critically important to the overall well-being for lawyers.
I think lawyers have a very difficult time turning their minds off, especially, at least for me, going to sleep. I can't sleep because I have all these thoughts running through my head. But if you can take time during the day, I'm like you, I go to the gym, I actually meditate while I'm working out. In the gym, it's really difficult. I have gym equipment here at home, so I can work out and be thankful that I have that quiet time where I don't have the music playing, I don't have anybody else knowing, and I can meditate and work out at the same time. So you don't have to just close yourself up in a quiet room in order to meditate.
So some comments, thank you. Appreciate the thoughtful responses. Being aware of your thoughts is meditation. You are meditating. And we have one question. How do you deal with people who apply a reductive reasoning to their religion / spirituality? That is, I believe / follow XYZ religion because it is correct / true. Therefore, I am correct / true to the exclusion of other religion / spiritual beliefs.
When I was a younger lad, I would have argued with them. There's a great quote by Keanu Reeves, of all people, which has always stuck with me. I know, Bill of Bill and Ted's. And he said, if you believe so angrily that 2 + 2 = 5, go ahead and have fun with that. I'm going to go ahead and spend my day doing something else. And as simple as that sounds, and as wacky as that sounds, I think there's so much truth to that. You got to pick your battles in life. And if that's what gets somebody else through the day, or if that's just where their identity is wrapped, no judgment, that works for them. Okay. I just don't engage. That's a little bit of that patience coming through.
I'm with you. I don't engage, but when I'm forced to, I back off at the specifics, go to the generalities of, fundamentally your religion, whoever it is I may be in discourse with, and mine, have commonalities. It may be at a 40,000-foot level, and you may not be able to rationalize it. In which case, don't try. And generally, I don't. I'm like you, Rayhan. I don't engage in that. If that's right for you, more power to you. That's not me.
That question struck me very personally because I grew up Catholic all of my life. And when I was in high school, I wanted to explore other religions, just to learn about other religions. And of course, the Catholic Church doesn't want to teach you any other religion. It doesn't want you looking at any other religion because they are one of the most exclusive religions that I have, and I've since studied others, that actually believe they are always right as to the religious aspects of your life. And I disagree with that. And so I thought that question was very interesting. I believe whatever religion you believe in, or whatever God you don't believe in, if it gets you through your life, you are actually following that religion. It's all one God. I mean, we came here from somewhere. Okay. And some people are Christians, some people are not Christians. Some people don't even believe in God. But we all have the same purpose in life, even if we don't know what it is.
I think that's great because that's the closing question. But before that, has your law practice influenced your spirituality?
Boy, that's a tough one.
You're the maverick, Rehan, always starting. Can I pitch it over to you?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think my law practice gives me the blessing, for which I'm very grateful for, of interacting with people I would never interact with socially, not just because it wouldn't intersect with those folks. And a real blessing of my practice has always been the ability to forge, deep, long-lasting relationships with clients. And that a part of that's getting to know them, and getting to know their families and what they believe in and what they don't. And I don't know if it answers the question, but it's because of that level of interaction that I have the ability to have with people, it exposes me to new and different ways of thinking and new ideas. And that's always a good thing for me, whether I agree with it or not. It's something for me to chew on. But as far as the matters that I do and my sense of justice and all those things, I don't think so. Um, but that could be because of the areas of law that I practice.
Rebecca, the question was more, has your law practice affected your spirituality?
And so I'm just saying interaction
Yeah.
with clients,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think my practice of law has guided me towards religious choices of any sort, but they do go hand in hand. Who I am and how I practice law. Sometimes the kind of matters I take on. But no, I don't believe I've made religious choices because of my law practice. I don't think.
The question comes from, the obvious question is, how does your spirituality affect your practice? So in the converse, have you, like Rehan, you were saying, your interaction with clients, how it's worked both ways, not just in a one directional way of your spirituality toward your practice, but your practice toward your spirituality in terms of, you've talked about dealing with stress and how that relates to your self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-care, that kind of thing. Does that
Well,
clarify it a little?
yeah, I mean, one of the things that law school and practicing law makes crystal clear, if not teaches you, is that there's at least two, many times six sides to every equation. And that training, that background, that understanding certainly impacts how I view religion. There are different ways of interpreting anything or understanding people or what motivates them. So it's not directly answering the question.
Actually, that's perfect. Thank you.
If that's perfect, then I have nothing to add.
It's practice, not perfect. So our final question, so I've put the course number in the chat, but our final question, tying it together, well, actually, let me skip that because we've already addressed it, and I wanted to get to it, but we don't have enough time. So, but I want to leave with, what wisdom can you share with other attorneys seeking to find balance between their spirituality and their law practice or the profession of law?
Consider religion as one of the opportunities to help you maintain a balanced life and deal with the stress of the practice of law. Not just the stress, but how you act with others, how you engage with others. For some, that may be tremendous. For others, perhaps that's not the right thing. But it certainly is one of the tools that's available to all of us.
I'll go a little more general. I agree
Okay.
with everything David just said. I'd say
That's first.
prioritize. Oh man, David, now you're letting our secrets out. I'd say prioritize yourself first and foremost. And as simple as that sounds, and it almost goes back to everything I learned in kindergarten, but it's still really, really true, especially when you have a busy practice, family commitments, bills, mortgages, things like that. I mean, life happens. And if you're not prioritizing yourself in all the different ways that, my co-panelists have spoken to, it's really, really hard. And, and I think the more time you spend with it, the more you think in those terms, more and more opportunities, avail themselves, whether it's, working out in the gym, maybe it's the people you interact with, it's how you interact with people. I think most importantly, how you interact with yourself and how you speak to yourself. Are you giving yourself grace? What we do is really hard. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And take care of yourself so that you can have a career at this, rather than there's the negative stories out there for a reason, not because people are inherently bad, but because it's hard, and not everyone gets the information and knowledge and ability to prioritize themselves. That's my view of it. Obviously, life is life, and there are a lot of things out of our control, but what we can control are our choices. And if we can use the self as a priority, I think it's something. It may not solve everything, but it's something.
Speaking as a person of color and as a female, the law has not been fair, as you said, David, to my kind. And so it's very difficult. I did not have a mentor, which is one reason I was happy to be able to join this panel, is because I think the only way you can get through law is to have somebody mentor you and help you. Nobody in my family had ever practiced law, and I had no mentors, but I had certain types of people who helped me along the way, in spite of the discrimination that I was facing. And so I try and give back by mentoring others. I think that's really important. It's what you do, Rebecca, and everybody in your office, is vital to being able to practice law and mesh it with whatever spirituality and taking care of yourself.
Thank you. So just a few comments in the chat for afterwards. If any of you have experienced Quakerism / Religious Society of Friends, I would love to connect outside of this Zoom. And then spiritual well-being is an important aspect of our lawyer wellness. So for those of you that you would like to contact the panelists, Rayhan Hassan is at Hassan LLC. David Sesserman has his own firm as well. Wai, she has her email. You can contact our office and we can put you in contact with her. Thank you, everyone, for such a wonderful conversation full of hope, peace, and self-care. Our next event will be April 15th, Neurodivergence in Law Practice. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Registration for that next event will be found on our website. Thank you, our panelists, and everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.